Before we continue, take a slow breath with me, because the chapter you're about to hear was the first turning point in my life, the moment when the quiet travels with us began to shift towards something far greater. In those days, I still believed my world was small. Me, the road, the markets, and the gentle rhythm of duty. But destiny was already watching, already waiting, already opening doors I did not yet know existed. Tonight, I will take you into that moment, the meeting, the choice, the spark that set my true path into motion. Are you ready? Then come with me and let the next chapter begin. In the months that followed, our lives became a rhythm between the smaller city and the capital. Onis's duties grew. He was often sent to oversee supplies, to count soldiers, to carry messages between commanders and court. I watched him work. He was careful, methodical, not brilliant, perhaps, but reliable. The kind of man upon whom great men lean without noticing. Sometimes, when he read reports aloud in our home, I would hear something in them that he had not. Listen, I would say, pointing to a certain phrase. This man praises his troops too much. He is hiding something. No one speaks that well of soldiers, unless he fears what will be discovered. Or, this number of grain seems wrong. If they had truly harvested this much, the markets would not be so hungry. Someone is filling their own stores. Ones began, cautiously, to test my instincts. Once, he adjusted his advice to a superior based on my observation. When events proved I had been right, he said nothing at first. He only watched me. Do you understand, he said finally, what it means to see what others overlook? I understand it keeps us from being deceived, I said. It also makes you valuable, he replied. And being valuable in the eyes of powerful men can be either protection or a very sharp leash. He was not wrong. Word began to spread quietly that Ans's wife had a sharp mind, that she listened more than she spoke, that sometimes her husband's reports seemed oddly precise. Some laughed, some scoffed, some grew wary. But in a world where kings planned campaigns that could devour thousands of lives, where cities could fall because a single miscalculation went unnoticed, even whispers could travel upward. And above us all, in a palace where walls drank every sound, a king was listening for news of anything that might bring him an edge against his enemies. His name was Ninus. I did not know, as I lay beside Uns at night, listening to the faint sounds of the city's breathing, that the path of my life was already bending toward his. I knew only that my world had grown larger, from a riverbank to a house, from a house to a city, from a city to a court. I had seen walls and walked streets I had once only imagined. I had tasted the air where power lived. I thought I was only beginning to understand this new world. In truth, I was standing at the edge of a far greater circle, one whose center was a throne, and whose boundary would someday stretch to Bactria and beyond. You're listening to me from your own smaller or larger circle. Have you ever felt your life expanding like this? One moment you live within one set of walls, and the next, some decision, yours or another's, pushes those walls outward. It can be dizzying. It can be intoxicating. It can also be the beginning of a kind of hunger that no simple meal will ever satisfy again. I became, in those days, the woman with eyes that saw cities, not just their beauty, but their veins and nerves, the flows of money, the channels of gossip, the places where fear pulled in dark corners. I still thought I could simply observe and remain untouched. I did not yet understand that if you stare too long at the heart of an empire, it will eventually turn its gaze back on you. That gaze was coming, swift and heavy, carried on the hooves of horses and the dust of marching soldiers, toward a city called Bactria, toward a siege that would make my name echo through the stories long after my body became dust. But that, too, is for another chapter. For now, remember me like this, a river child grown into a woman, standing in the shadow of carved bulls and painted lions, eyes wide open, seeing not just what was, but what could be bent, shaped, moved. The girl who had once stood outside the walls was now inside them, and the walls, though they did not yet know it, had welcomed someone who would one day change what they were. I did not meet King Linus for the first time as a queen, or as a legend, or even as a woman of interest. I met him as a voice behind a curtain, a presence, a rumor, a shape carved into the minds of every man who served beneath him. Before I ever saw his face, I heard the stories. Ninus the Conqueror, Ninus whose armies crushed cities like clay jars. Ninus who did not forgive unrest. Ninus who rewarded brilliance and destroyed incompetence without blinking. Men feared him, men admired him, men lied for him, killed for him, died for him. I wondered quietly if anyone had ever spoken to him. Without trembling, I would learn soon enough. It began with a map. Honest had brought it home one evening, a tablet freshly marked with new lines, the corners still gritty with drying clay. He laid it on the low table between us, the lamplight turning the carved symbols into tiny mountains and rivers of shadow. "What is this?" I asked. "A request," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "The king plans a campaign, a difficult one, a siege that has lasted far too long. He asked for reports on which commanders have failed him. He hesitated, and for suggestions on which might serve him better. Suggestions, I repeated. That is dangerous." Hans gave a soft, humorless laugh. "Everything at court is dangerous." He handed me the tablet. I looked down. I saw the problem immediately. This was not a simple map. This was a battlefield frozen in clay. Bactria far to the east, rich and stubborn, a city with thick walls, the kind that expected an empire but refused to bow to one. Assyrian forces had encircled it for months, maybe longer. Supplies dwindling, patience thinning, pride growing desperate. "This commander," I said, pointing to one mark, "is cautious, too cautious. He moves only when every risk is counted 3 times. By the time he acts, his chance has collapsed." Hans watched me, silent. "This one," I pointed to another, relies on brute force, against walls like betrayals, that is suicide. And this third? He asked. I studied the symbol. This commander had moved quickly, too quickly, splitting his forces across terrain that punished division. He is ambitious, I said. Too ambitious. He wants the king to see his boldness. He is gambling with lives to catch a royal eye. Hans exhaled slowly. You speak as though you have lived among generals. War is not so different from life, I murmured. People show you everything in a way. They seek victory. Hans hesitated, then finally said the words he had been holding back. The king wishes for clearer eyes. He asks that all who see what others miss send their impressions. And you want to send mine? I said. No, he answered. I want you to speak them to me, and I will send them as my own. That way, if your insight angers someone, the anger falls on me, not you. He said it with affection, with care, with the fear of a man who knows that the closer you get to the center of power, the hotter the air becomes. But he did not yet understand something essential. I did not fear fire. I had already lived on a river that drowned whoever it chose. Fire, at least, burns. Honestly, tell me what you want to write, I said softly, and I did. I explained that Bactria would not fall to force, that the city's pride hardened each time an army pushed against its walls. I explained that the siege starved not only the defenders, but also the attackers, that morale decayed like fruit left too long in the sun. I explained that patience was losing the king more time than it won him ground. If it were me, I said quietly, I would strike where they do not expect. A hidden path, a weakness in the terrain, a feint to draw their attention, then the strike behind their confidence. Honest listened, and as he listened, a shadow crossed his face, the shadow of knowing I was stepping past the place where a wife should stand. Do not speak such things outside this room, he warned. You do not know who listens for ambitious minds, or who crushes them. I am not ambitious. I lied gently. I only see patterns. He did not believe me, but he wrote the report anyway. The response came faster than I expected. 3 days later, a messenger from the palace halted his horse at our door. My breath stilled. Even Hans straightened, the way a man does when he senses his life is about to turn. The messenger handed him a tablet, sealed with the king's own mark. I watched Anna's break it. I watched his eyes move. I saw the color drain just slightly from his face. What is it? I asked, my voice low. He looked at me as if torn between pride and worry. The king, he said, wishes to speak to me. A beat, then another. No, he added quietly. He wishes to speak to my wife. The silence that followed felt like the world holding its breath. Me? I whispered. Honest nodded. He wants to hear your thoughts, your strategy, your analysis. His jaw tightened. He wants to see the mind that wrote those words through my hand. I thought you sent them as your own. I tried, he said, but kings did not become kings by being blind. He sees when a voice is not the hand that carries it. Fear flickered through me. Not fear of meeting a king, but of what meeting him would mean. This was the point where an ordinary life could still be pulled back into safety. If I stepped into that palace as myself, I would never again be invisible, never again be simple, never again be only the wife of a minor official. I might rise, I might fall, but I would not remain untouched. Do you want me to go? I asked honest. He closed his eyes. I want you safe, he said, but I also know you. If you do not go, you will regret it all your life. His voice broke a little. And if you go, I may lose you, not because you will love him, but because he will see what I see. A terrible tenderness passed between us then. The tenderness of two people who loved each other, but whose lives were standing in different kinds of light. I touched his hand. You will not lose me easily, I said. I am not a feather to be blown away by a king's breath. But even as I said it, I knew the truth. A king's breath can become a storm, and storms reshape landscapes, even hearts. When I entered the palace to meet Ninus for the first time, I did not wear jewels. I did not adorn myself like a woman seeking favor. I wore a simple dress and the calmness I had learned beside the river in the quiet house of my foster parents. The guards led me through several halls. Cool stone beneath my feet, the scent of incense curling through the air, painted lions watching from the walls. Finally, we arrived at a long room whose pillars rose like the trunks of petrified trees. At the far end, on a platform carved with geometric patterns, stood a man. He was not what I expected. He was not a young king, but age had not softened him. His hair was dark but threaded with iron gray. His beard was trimmed precisely. His shoulders were broad, his presence heavy. He was a man built from decisions, not gentle ones. His eyes found mine at once, not my dress, not my posture, not my lowered head, my eyes. We held each other's gaze longer than was proper. The chamberlain sucked in a breath, waiting for the king to reprimand me. I did not look away. Ninus lifted a hand, and the servants bowed themselves out. We were alone. You are the wife, he said at last, the one with the sharp tongue hidden behind the softer one. I bowed slightly, only if the situation requires it, my king. He circled me slowly, not like a predator, assessing prey, but like a strategist examining a piece on the board that he had not noticed before. You see things your husband does not, he said. You hear things he does not. You understand things without being taught. I did not answer. Silence, I had learned, can be more truthful than words. He stopped in front of me. Speak, he commanded. What would you do in Bactria? I inhaled once, then I spoke. I spoke not timidly, not recklessly, but with a clarity that had lived inside me since childhood, the clarity that had seen the rhythm of people, the faults in patterns, the way fear moved through a crowd. I told him that the siege was wasting time and men. I told him that the commanders he trusted were either too safe, too proud, or too hungry for his approval. I told him that cities like Bactria did not fall from the outside. They fell from the inside. I told him where the terrain around the city dipped, where the walls were thickest, where the defenders would grow bold, where they would grow careless. I told him that he needed deception, not brute force. You do not win a battle by pushing a wall, I said softly. You win by making the wall come down on its own. When I finished, there was a long silence. I forced myself not to shift, not to lower my eyes, not to erase my presence. Finally, Ninus exhaled, a sound like the release of a drawn bow. You speak, he said, slowly, as though you have lived a dozen lives, as though you stood beside generals I have buried. I listen, I answered, and I learn. He studied me with a gaze that held no warmth, only calculation. But calculation in a king is its own kind of respect. He stepped closer, so close that I could feel the weight of his attention. You are not like the other women of my court, he said. No, I agreed quietly. I am not. His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. Something sharper. I could use a mind like yours, he said. The words were a door, a promise, a threat, a prophecy. I felt something shift inside me, something that had been asleep waking slowly. You would use me, I said carefully, but would you listen to me? He held my gaze, and for the first time I saw something in his eyes that I had not expected. Respect and something else, dangerous and unspoken. I will listen, he said, if you continue to speak truth. Truth, kings always say they want it. Few tolerate its taste. Still, I bowed my head, not in surrender, in acknowledgement. When I lifted my eyes again, he was still watching me. Go, he said finally, and wait for summons. There was a faint tone in his voice, one that aunts would later fear, and that I, foolishly, did not yet understand. This is only the beginning. As I left the palace, my heartbeat was strange, not fast, not slow, but stretched, like something being pulled into shape. I felt as if the walls of the great city were leaning inward, listening, recognizing me. Hans met me before I reached home. His eyes searched mine for fear, for excitement, for danger. He wants to see you again, I said. Hans closed his eyes. A shadow fell over his face. I feared that, he whispered. I feared it with every breath. I took his hand. I'm still yours, I said softly. But even as the words left my mouth, we both felt the truth settle between us like dust. A king had seen me, and once a king sees something he wants, whether a weapon, a mind, or a woman, the world around it begins to shift. This chapter ends here, not at a dramatic summit, but at the quiet beginning of a fault line, the line that would split my life in two, before Ninus and after him. In the next chapter, the world moves toward Bactria, toward the siege where my name will be forged, toward the moment when I step out of being a wife and into becoming a legend. If you have never stood before a city that refuses to kneel, you do not yet know how loud silence can be. By the time I first heard the name Bactria spoken in the king's chambers, It already hung in the air like a bruise, a word that tasted of stubborn stone, of exhausted men, of pride on both sides of the wall. Bactria was not just a city, it was an idea. To the king, it was unfinished work. To the generals, it was a wound in their reputation. To the scribes, it was a column of numbers that refused to resolve into victory. To me, at first, it was a pattern, a problem, a knot. I did not yet know that it would also become the anvil on which my own legend would be hammered into shape. The summons came in the blue-gray light of a morning, when the city had not yet shaken the sleep from its streets. A palace page at our door, the seal of the lion, pressed into clay, the same 3 words, the king calls. Hans looked at the tablet, then at me. His eyes were full of things he did not say. Fear of losing me, fear of denying the king, fear of what it meant that a woman had become part of these conversations at all. "Do you wish you had never let me speak?" I asked him quietly, as I wrapped my hair and covered it with a veil appropriate for the court. He hesitated. "I wish," he said at last, "that the world were safer for a woman who sees as clearly as you do." "That is not the same as wishing me blind," I murmured. He gave a tired half-smile. "No," he admitted, "I have never wanted you blind." This time, when I entered the palace hall, Ninus was not alone. A cluster of commanders stood near him, men with faces lined by sun and war, armor bearing the marks of campaigns long past. They smelled of leather, iron, and argument. As I approached, I could feel their skepticism like heat. "A woman?" one of them muttered under his breath, loud enough for the others to hear. "Has the king begun to seek counsel from weaving runes?" Another snorted. "Perhaps she will embroider new borders on our maps." Their laughter was low and sharp, the laughter of men who never imagined a woman could be anything but a decoration in their world. I heard every word. Ninus heard them too. He did not silence them. That, in its own way, was a test. He watched me come forward, measured my spine, my eyes, the way I carried the weight of their scorn. "Semiramis," he said, his voice filling the hall, cutting through their mutters. "We speak of Bactria." I bowed. "My king," I answered. "Then we speak of stubborn walls and commanders who have grown as tired as their enemies." That made a few heads snap toward me more sharply. Ninus gestured toward the table laid out with maps, parchment and clay, stones marking positions of troops, lines for rivers, small scratches for fortified hills. "Show them," he said simply, "how you see what they have failed to see." I stepped closer to the table. The generals shifted, some rolling their eyes, some folding their arms. I ignored them all. I let my gaze trace the river near Bactria, the elevation of the hills, the direction of prevailing winds, the routes of supply lines. "You have been pressing here," I said, touching one side of the city with my fingertip. "Again and again, your rams strike the same section of wall. Your men throw ladders against the same stones. The wall is weakest there." One of the commanders objected sharply. "We chose that spot for a reason." "Yes," I replied calmly, "and so did they." He frowned. I looked up at Ninus. May I? I asked. He tilted his head, amused. Speak, Bactria is proud, I said, letting my voice carry. It is rich. It believes itself unbreakable. Every time you attack the same place, you confirm something for them, that they were right to trust that wall. Every failed assault is a sacrifice to their confidence. I turned back to the map. Your men grow tired, their men grow bold. Each day you repeat the same pattern, you feed their belief that they can outlast you. And what would you have us do? Another commander demanded. Magic. Walk through the wall. A murmur of approval rose around him. I gave him a small, almost kind smile. Not through it, I said. Around it, under it, above it, any way but the one they expect. I pointed to another part of the terrain, a place where the river curled closer to the city's foundations. Here, I said, the ground dips. The water does strange things when rivers are forced to bend. It gnaws, it undermines, it softens. One of the older generals squinted at the map, then at me. How do you know this? He asked. Less hostile now. Have you walked that river? I've walked many rivers, I replied, and I know what they do when forced. I looked at Ninus. You could use that. Dig under cover of night, not directly at the wall. They will listen for that. Further away, where they do not expect. Let the river do the work your man no longer can. A silence fell. One of the younger commanders made a dismissive noise. This is speculation, he scoffed. A woman's tale, rivers and undermining. We are at war, not composing a song. Before I could answer, Ninus's gaze snapped to him. Be very careful, the king said, his voice suddenly quiet and deadly. There are battles to win on maps before there are battles to win on fields. The commander swallowed, bowed, and fell silent. Ninus turned back to me. You would have us dig, he summarized, like moles. If you wish to bring down a structure that stands firm against your blows, I said, you weaken what it stands on. You do not argue with the stone. You argue with the earth beneath it. A few of the older men exchanged glances. They were not fools. They understood that if this worked, their pride would be bruised, their methods called into question. Even if we do this, one said slowly, the siege still stands. Their morale is not yet broken. Their leaders still believe they can outlast us. Then give them a reason to doubt, I replied. Play with their certainty. Make them move where they do not wish to move. Force them to divide their attention. Between the walls, the gates, the river, the shadows, I moved a stone on the board, placing it where the enemy would least expect an attack. Send a small force with banners and noise against one gate, I said. Make it a spectacle. Let them think you are foolish enough to repeat your mistake. While their eyes are fixed there, move in the dark elsewhere, not in great numbers. That will be heard, but with precision, like knives. Ninus murmured, not hammers. Yes, I said, knives. He studied the map, then studied me. At Bactria, he said, you believe you could succeed where some of my best commanders have failed. I held his gaze. I believe, I said softly, that they have been fighting the battle they wish they had, not the one in front of them, and that I see the one in front of them more clearly. The hall breathed in. The moment was delicate, a hair on the edge of a blade. If Ninus felt his pride threatened, he could have crushed me right then with a single gesture. But his pride was a different kind. It wanted victory more than it wanted flattery, which is why what he said next would change everything. You will come, he decided. The hall stirred. With the army, my king. One of the generals protested, horrified. Take a woman to the siege, to the front. Ninus did not look away from me. Yes, he said, a woman, this woman. If her plan fails, we will know her words are as empty as you believe. If it succeeds, he let the thought trail off. We all knew what it meant. If I come, I said quietly, it will not be to sit in a tent and pour wine. One of the commanders actually choked on his breath. Ninus's mouth twitched. And what would you do? Semiramis, he asked, his tone like the testing touch of a sword on armor. Lead my men. Stand on the walls. I will be where the decisions are made, I said, not because I wish to take glory from those whose hands hold the swords, but because it is useless to speak sense to men who are too far away to hear it. He exhaled, something like dark amusement in his eyes. You speak as though you own your place already, he said. No, I answered. I speak as though I know I have something you can use. Bravery. One of the generals muttered. Arrogance. Another added clarity. Ninus corrected. Then, to me, you will come. As advisor, you will have no command, not formally. Men are not eager to take orders from a woman, but I will listen. And if you are right, Bactria will fall, and you will have earned your place at this table. He turned away. The matter settled in his mind. The hall erupted into low discussion. Shock, rumors forming. Even as we stood there, I bowed, turned to leave. I could feel the hostile eyes of some commanders on my back, and the grudging respect of a few others. I also felt something else, heavy and invisible, settling onto my shoulders. Responsibility. Words spoken in quiet rooms were one thing. Words that marched armies toward death were another. As I stepped out into the glare of the palace courtyard, the sun felt hotter, the sky wider, the world sharper. I had asked to stand near the fire. Now it would see what I was made of. Telling Ans that I was to march with the army was like telling a man that the river was rising, and his house lay in the lowest part of the valley. He looked at me, as if he were trying to memorize my face before it changed forever. Can you refuse? He asked, knowing the answer. You know I cannot, I said softly, and you know I would not, even if I could. His hands clenched. He turned away, then turned back again, breath unsteady. You will be surrounded by men whose idea of a woman's place is at a loom, he said. They will blame you if anything goes wrong. They will hate you if anything goes right. You will be walking unarmed into a field full of knives. I stepped closer. I am not unarmed, I said. He gave a bitter laugh. You have a mind. Yes, he said, but minds do not stop arrows. No, I agreed, but they can redirect where the arrows fly. His jaw trembled. You will change there, he whispered. War changes everyone. Kings, soldiers, even women who go to watch. As if I have not already changed, I replied quietly. The moment I left the riverbank, I began walking toward whatever this is. He closed his eyes, then opened them again. A decision made. Then I will come, he said. I will not let you walk into that alone. You cannot abandon your post here, I protested. He shook his head. My duties are being sent forward, he said. The king has already arranged it. I am to serve among his officials at the siege. He swallowed. It seems he enjoys having our household near his horizon. There was more in that than either of us dared speak. For that night, we held each other, as though the walls of our house were already falling down. In a way, they were. The march to Bactria was long, nights under 2 bright stars, days under 2 harsh suns. The army moved like a great, slow beast, its breath the rhythm of drums, its bones the lines of wagons, its blood the flow of men. I rode near the king's command staff, not among the soldiers, though their eyes followed me, curious, resentful, amused. Some whispered, the king's new toy, the witch, the river girl, the ambitious wife. Others, more practical, shrugged and focused on their own aches, their own fears. War does not allow too much time to worry about those who do not hold swords. At night, the camps spread out like islands of fire on dark water. Tents rose, cooking fires, smoked, voices drifted. I listened to soldiers talking about home, wives, lovers, children, to commanders muttering about supplies, to scouts reporting on the terrain ahead. I knew I was a strange presence, a woman in a place where women did not belong. So I made myself useful where I could, in observations, in questions, in careful suggestions that did not provoke open defiance. One evening, around a low table in the king's tent, the commanders gathered to discuss their final approach. The air inside the tent was thick with the smell of sweat, dust, and burning oil. Maps lay spread out, weighted at the corners. Outside, the sounds of the camp hummed like distant bees. We will resume the assaults as before, one of the generals insisted, finger jabbing at the same section of wall. Their food stores cannot last. Even stubborn stone must crack eventually. I watched Ninus's face, impatient, tired of hearing the same plan dressed in different words. Stone does not crack from being flattered, I said softly. Several heads turned toward me, frowns deepening. You speak again, the same general said, voice dripping with irritation. We are soldiers. You are someone the king invited to speak. Ninus cut in sharply. Continue, Semiramis. I inclined my head slightly to him, then pointed to the map. Your men are exhausted, I said. Their morale is thin. Every failed assault drains them more. But bacteria still believes itself capable. You are draining yourselves to prove to them that they are strong. I shifted the markers. Strike their certainty first, I said, then their walls. I outlined again the plan I had first described in the palace. The feint at the familiar gate, the digging near the river, the tunnels shored up in silence, the use of the terrain itself against the city's foundations. One of the older commanders spoke up, the one who had squinted at the map weeks before. Suppose, he said slowly, that this works. Suppose your tunnels reach near their walls without collapse. When you bring it down, their defenders will not simply lie down and die. They will pour through the breach. We must be ready to enter before they can organize. I nodded. Yes, I agreed. You will need a force ready to move faster than their shock can harden into resistance. Not a large force. Large numbers move slow. A chosen few, trained, prepared, able to move like water through a broken jar. The king's guard. Someone suggested a mix. I countered. Some of the king's best. Some men who know how to move quietly. Some who will not panic when stone falls around them. And who will lead this chosen few? The question came like a thrown spear. The tent quieted one by one. Eyes turned toward me. I felt their doubt like a wall. I also felt something else rising from the center of my chest. A clarity so sharp it almost hurt. If I am wrong, I said slowly, then all of this is wasted breath. A man can lead any man you trust. I let that sink in. Then, but if I am right, I looked at Ninus. If I am right, you will need someone there who understands why it is working. Someone who can improvise when events do not follow the neat lines drawn on these maps. He studied me. You suggest yourself, he said, his tone unreadable. No, I said quietly. I suggest that someone who sees the whole pattern be allowed to stand where the pattern breaks. A long heartbeat, too. The commander who had opposed me most began to protest. This is madness, he snapped. Women do not lead charges. They do not wait at breaches. If the men see, they will see victory. I cut in, my voice still calm. They will not care whose mouth gave the order, if their bodies remain alive to collect their pay. Ninus leaned back slightly, eyes half-lidded, as though listening to music only he could hear. Finally, he spoke. You will be there, he decided, in the breach, with the chosen force. The tent went very, very still, not in outrage, in realization. A king's word is a stone dropped in still water. The ripples were already spreading. The night before the assault, I slept very little. You might think I lay awake in fear of arrows, of collapsing stone, of death, but those fears were distant, like storms on the horizon. Closer, more pressing, was a different fear. What if I had been wrong? It is one thing to speak boldly in a safe room. It is another to stand on the edge of a plan that will bury men if you miscalculate. I slipped out of my tent and walked to the edge of the encampment. The air was cold, the sky clear. Stars spilled overhead like scattered grain. In the distance, I could see the faint outline of Bactria's walls, dark against darker sky. Torches flickered along the ramparts, ants of fire moving slowly. I closed my eyes. I thought of the river that had almost claimed my life as an infant, of how it had gnawed at its banks, always seeking, always patient, of how my foster father had made small channels to guide its overflow, how he had respected its strength without fearing it unnecessarily. Old river, I whispered into the night, to the memory of that water and all waters like it. If you brought me from your mouth to this place, do not abandon me now. If you have any favor with the gods, lend it to me. The wind shifted, cool against my cheek. A coincidence? Perhaps, but I felt calmer. When I returned to the tent, Annes was awake, sitting on his mat, head in his hands. You should sleep, I told him softly. So should you, he replied without looking up. I sat beside him. Do you regret coming? I asked. He sighed. I regret the kind of world that makes this necessary, he said, but not the part where I am near you. We sat in silence for a while. Finally, he said, very softly, if you survive this, you will not be mine alone anymore. The words cut more deeply than any blade could. I did not answer. We both knew he was right. At dawn, the river mist clung to the ground, like breath that refused to leave the earth. The feint began as planned. Banners unfurled, drums thudded, men moved toward the familiar gate, their shouts rehearsed, their anger real. On the walls, Bactrian defenders gathered, shouting back, loosing arrows, hurling curses. It was a dance they had learned well by now. They believed they knew the steps, while all eyes were drawn to that noise. Another movement began, quieter, deeper. The tunnels near the river had been dug over nights of sweat and fear. Men working by lamplight, hands raw, lungs choked with dust. I had walked those tunnels myself, stooping under their low ceilings, pressing my palms against their shoring beams, listening to the faint groan of the earth. Now our chosen force gathered near their mouth, armor muted, faces grim. I wore armor too. It had been made for me hastily but well. Scaled plates, fitted over leather, straps tightened across my chest and shoulders. It was heavier than anything I had ever worn, but its weight steadied me. My hair was bound and hidden. From a distance, I looked like a slight, narrow-shouldered soldier. Up close, no one would mistake me for a man. But close up, we would all be too busy surviving to care. One of the commanders, the older one who had begun to respect me, looked at me as we waited. You are not afraid, he observed. I am afraid of many things, I replied, but not of standing where my own words have led me. He snorted softly. There may be more of a soldier in you than in some men I have known, he said. Do not insult me, I murmured, a ghost of a smile flickering across my lips. He chuckled once, then sobered. When the wall goes, he said, there will be chaos. Remember what you said last night. Stone does not argue, men do. I remember. I said. The signal came, a muffled boom in the distance as our engineers completed their final work beneath the foundations. A shudder in the earth, a strange, deep sound like a giant drawing breath. Then a thunderous crack. The section of wall above our tunnels did not simply fall. It broke, stone sheared away, blocks tumbling, dust exploding outward in a choking cloud. From the defender's point of view, the world simply betrayed them. For a heartbeat, there was only shock. Then, shouts, trumpets, chaos. Now, I said, before they remembered to be brave. We moved through dust so thick it turned the world white, over broken stone that shifted underfoot, within air that tasted of chalk and fear. Shapes loomed in the murk, then fallen blocks, splintered wood. We climbed, slid, fought to keep our footing. On the other side of the breach, Bactrian soldiers scrambled, some coughing, some trying to form ranks, all stunned. Forward, the commander shouted. Keep tight. But in that first moment, many of them looked to me. I saw it, the flicker of recognition in their eyes, that this was the mind they had followed on the map, now ahead of them in the dust. So I did what I knew I must. I moved first, not elegantly, not with hero's grace, just forward over a fallen stone, past a defender, still blinking dust from his eyes, into the space where order had not yet formed. A Bactrian soldier swung at me, wild, desperate. I ducked, felt the blade, cut air above my head, stabbed a short sword into the gap between his armor plates, because someone had taught me how, because I had watched men train, because I had practiced in secret with a dull blade until my arms burned. He fell. I did not let myself think about his face. There would be time for that later. If I survived, left flank, I shouted, voice raw. They are stronger there. Push them into the narrow street. I could see the pattern forming, even in chaos, where men clustered too tightly, where the defenders still believed they could close the gap, where fear was about to break into rout. We pushed, we yielded when we had to. We let them move where it was worst for them. Sometimes I caught flashes of my own soldiers' expressions, surprise at my presence, then grim acceptance, then a kind of fierce, bewildered loyalty. If she is here, their eyes seemed to say, then so are we. All around us, the city was waking into panic. Far from the breach, Bactrian citizens screamed, ran, dragged belongings, prayed to gods that had not warned them their walls could fall. We carved a path inward, not wide, but deep, a wedge, aimed for the heart of the city's defenses. Behind us, more of our forces began to pour through the breach, turning our thin spear point into something more solid. Once, on a narrow street where the buildings leaned close, we were nearly cut off. Bactrian reinforcements surged from a side alley, their armor less dusty, their eyes more focused. For a moment, it was too much. We were pressed. Blades clanged. Men shouted. Fear rose like heat. I felt the edge of panic graze my mind. Then, somewhere under the roar, I heard the river, not a little river, though one flowed not far from us, but the memory of water finding its way around stone. Back. I yelled to the man near me. Not here. There. I pointed to a narrower passage, one that would force the enemy into a funnel. Let them come, I said, pulling our line back a few steps, then close on them. We did. They came, confident in their sudden advantage, and crashed into a space that did not allow them to use it. Our blades met them in a tighter arc. Their numbers behind could not reach us. Their line bulged, stuttered, then fractured. We pushed them back, step by hard-fought step. Somewhere behind me, someone shouted my name, first as a warning, then as a rally. Semiramis. Follow her. I did not have time to feel anything about it. By the time the sun had lifted higher into the sky, Bactria was no longer a city calmly resisting a siege. It was a city trying to remember how to stand. After its foundation had shifted, the king's main forces, seeing the breach holding, pressed harder from without. Gates groaned, stones cracked. Resistance broke not all at once, but in pieces, like pottery under too much pressure. Finally, near the central square, the last organized band of defenders threw down their weapons. A hush fell, not complete. There were still pockets of fighting elsewhere, but a hush that carried something large inside it. Victory. Bactria had fallen. I stood there, breathing hard dust coating my face and armor. The taste of stone and iron and fatigue in my mouth. My limbs shook, not with weakness, with the effort of containing everything I was feeling. Relief, horror, vindication, grief for the dead on both sides. The knowledge that a plan I had shaped had become reality at the cost of countless lives. And beneath all that, a cold, clear line. I had been right. Niners entered the city later, as kings are meant to, at a measured pace, flanked by guards, under banners that had seen too many wars. He rode through streets, still thick with dust and smoke, past bodies already being dragged away, past doorways where terrified eyes watched from shadows. When he reached the central square, I was there. I stood beside the older commander, my armor scraped, my veil gone, my hair damp with sweat, my hands still trembling faintly. I expected, perhaps, a nod, a few words, a private acknowledgement. Kings are not usually generous in public. But Ninus was in a dangerous mood, the mood of a man whose pride had just been both wounded and healed. He dismounted. The square held its breath. He walked toward us, toward me. The commander beside me stepped slightly back, as though the ground itself were making room. Ninus stopped in front of me. His eyes moved over my armor, the dust on my cheeks, the way I stood. You were there, he said, ahead of my chosen men. Yes, my king, I replied, my voice steady. I could not see clearly from the back. A few of the surrounding officers shifted, half in outrage, half in reluctant admiration, and it worked. Nina said, the breach, the feint, the channeling, it all worked. Yes, I answered quietly. It did. He studied me for a long moment. In that moment, I understood something. I was no longer simply a curiosity to him. I was a tool that had proven itself, and kings do not leave good tools lying idle. He turned, raised his voice, so that it carried across the square. You all know, he said, how long this city defied us, how much blood it has demanded, how many of your comrades it has taken. You know how many of my commanders told me that the only answer was more of the same, more men, more rams, more time. But Bactria did not fall to repetition, it fell to something else. He turned back toward me, and with that one gesture, he lifted me into the full glare of the army's attention. It fell, he continued, to eyes that saw differently. The silence was like a physical thing. Every gaze on that square pressed against my skin. Many of you, he went on, will not like what I say next. I do not care. This woman, he almost spat the word, not in contempt, but as if he knew exactly how it would sound, in ears raised to believe it meant weakness. This woman helped win me this city. Her mind saw the pattern you did not. Her courage stood in the breach before some of you did. You will remember her name, Semiramis. The word rolled out over the square, settled into men's memories, into the dust, into the stone. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had not asked for this, not in so many words, but I had walked toward it. With every choice I had made, these walls, Nina said, gesturing to the broken stone around us, will be rebuilt under my rule. 11 kings will rise and fall in far-off lands, and still they will speak of this day. When they do, they will not only speak of me, they will speak of her. Some of the commanders looked as though they had swallowed sand. Others, surprisingly, nodded slightly, as if conceding something undeniable. Among the ordinary soldiers, the reaction was more practical. They had followed a plan that had kept more of them alive than the old ones had. They respected results more than tradition. A murmur began, not loud, not yet chanting, but a murmur of a name. Semiramis, Semiramis. I stood there, dust and blood on my armor, the world tilting. In that moment, I felt something crack open inside me, something that could never be closed again. The river girl, the shepherd's foundling, the wife of Hannes, the advisor, all of these had been shells. Inside them, something larger had been growing, pushing against their walls. On that square in Bactria, with a conquered city around me, and the king's words still hanging in the air, that something stepped out into the light, a queen, not yet in title, not yet in robes, but in essence. I felt it, and so did Ninus. I saw it in his eyes, not love, not yet, but recognition. Recognition is more dangerous than love. Love may wither. Recognition, once given, cannot be taken back without breaking something in the one who gave it. That night, Bactria burned in places, smoked in others, wept in hidden corners. Victorious soldiers celebrated. Defeated men counted their dead. Families clutched what was left to them. I stole a moment alone on a section of the broken wall, the stone still warm from the day's sun. The river flowed nearby, its surface reflecting the firelight from the city, like floating embers. I sat down, back against a half-fallen block, and finally let my hands shake. Blood, some mine, some not, stiffened my sleeves, dust gritted in my hair. My muscles hummed with exhaustion. In the distance, someone was singing drunkenly. Closer, someone was sobbing quietly. War is always both. Are you proud? The voice came from behind me. I turned. Honest stood there, face lined, eyes dark. I gestured for him to sit beside me. Proud. I repeated. I do not know if that is the word. What word would you use? He asked. I looked out at the river. Responsible, I said at last. Terrified, relieved, changed. We sat in silence for a while. The king praised you before them all. Anna said eventually. You know what that means? Yes. I replied quietly. I know. He will not be content with your mind only, he said, voice rough with something between jealousy and dread. He will want more. I did not pretend not to understand. Ninus was not like other men, but he was still a man, still a king. Power has its own appetite. I do not belong to him, I said softly. Not yet, Ons whispered, but he is not a man used to being denied. The words hung between us. On the broken wall of a conquered city, I felt the weight of two futures pressing against me. One in which I stepped back, clung to a smaller life, turned away from whatever path had just opened, and one in which I walked forward into a world where my name would be spoken, with awe, with hatred, with fascination, into a world where being mine and being the king's might become meat for the same hungry wolves. Do you wish? I asked Honest quietly that I had stayed a shepherd's daughter. He was silent for a long, long time. Then, in a voice so low I barely heard it, he said, I wish the gods had made a world small enough for you to be happy in it without having to become a storm. A tear slid down my cheek, cutting a clean line through the dust. It is too late for that, I whispered. Yes, he said. I know. We sat there until the night grew colder. The torches burned lower. The songs faded. Behind Bactria's broken walls, a queen was being born in secret, out of victory and regret. Her name would be Semiramis, and this siege, this breach, this public praise and private sorrow was the cradle in which she learned that greatness and loss drink from the same cup. You, lying in your own darkness, with your own small and large choices waiting. Never believe the stories that tell you greatness comes without a price. Never trust the songs that speak only of glory. Behind every city that falls, there are faces you will never see again. Behind every crown, there are nights like this one, quiet, heavy, filled with the question, was it worth it? I still do not have an answer that satisfies the girl I once was. But I know this, from Bactria onward, I could no longer pretend to be anything but what I was becoming. Not a river child, not just a wife, not only an advisor. I was a blade the king had drawn, and blades, once drawn, rarely slide back into their sheaths without tasting more than one kind of blood. And so, this chapter of my life closed quietly, with ons at my side, with duty pulling us from city to city, and with the faint, restless whisper of fate growing louder behind every passing day. I did not yet know how quickly everything would change, how one choice, one encounter would begin to pull me away from the life I thought was mine. But that is a story for the next night. Before we continue, tell me, in your own life, do you trust slow destiny or sudden change? Rest now. Let your breathing soften, and when you're ready, join me in the next episode, where the path of my fate truly begins to turn. Sleep well until we meet again.